Oh, that's right. Here we go.
From WCRS Studios in Greenwood, South Carolina, this is Meet Me at the Diner with your host, Ann Eller.
Oh, that's right. We're right here on WCRS this afternoon, and I have a very special call-in guest this afternoon, someone that it's been a very long time since we have talked to her, and that is Ellen Weaver. She, of course, is superintendent for the great state of superintendent of education for the great state of South Carolina. So glad to have her here with us this afternoon. Ellen Weaver, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic, Ann, my longtime friend. I'm glad to hear you're well, and I'm so excited to be on your show again.
Absolutely. And education certainly has taken a front and center face, particularly in the House and in the Senate. You have a lot of wins this year, and I know you'd love to speak to some of those wins. I don't think I have time for all of them, but what are some of the top wins that you'd like to discuss?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have seen a tremendous growth in state-level support for K-12 education investment over the last few years. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but since 2018-2019, we have raised our starting teacher pay in South Carolina by 52%. In 2018-2019, a starting teacher in South Carolina made $32,000, and this coming school year, they're going to be making $48,500. So that is just huge progress in the right direction when it comes to paying our teachers a competitive salary, making sure we're keeping up with the competitive states that we have around us here in the Southeast, and just really valuing teaching as the incredible foundation of all other professions that it is. Anyone who does anything in this life has come through a school and sat under the tutelage of a teacher. And so I'm so glad to say that we are working hard to take care of them here in South Carolina. We certainly have more to do. We know that a lot of our teachers are struggling with, behavior issues in the classroom, students coming really addicted to cell phones and technologies. So another big win that we had this year was rolling out our cell phone free school day, which we are just getting excellent feedback on from teachers. And there's so many other great things that I could talk about. Foundational skills. We have put such a high priority on early literacy and on strong math skills. And so there's some really exciting things happening in those areas too that if you're interested in, I'd love to talk more about.
Well, I do understand that you are doing high quality instructional materials aligned with their new math standards. What's that all about?
Yes, absolutely. Well, if I can back up and just tell you briefly what we have done in early literacy, because that is really informing the strategy that we're taking in math. And so around early literacy, we knew that we had to get back to what is called the science of reading. We now know that you have to have phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary building, and so many other things in order to be a proficient reader. You cannot just tell students to look at words and guess. They have to know how to sound them out. But unfortunately,
phonics, is that what you're talking about? Phonics, that old standard?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And Ann, we now have brain science that tells us that that is how students learn how to be good readers. And so it's almost like what's old is new again. But we have spent a lot of money here in South Carolina to make sure that we have put the right science of reading, phonics-based tools in our teachers' toolbox so that they can address our reading crisis. We know that reading and math are in crisis all around the country, but we see bright spots. For instance, in Mississippi, they call it the Mississippi Miracle. They put those tools in their teachers' toolbox and got high-quality instructional materials, and they are now beating the national average in terms of reading gains, especially among their poorest students. And so we're doing that same thing right here in South Carolina. And so that same strategy that we're using in reading of giving teachers the tools that they need in terms of how to teach the content, and then giving them high quality materials that are very rigorous and aligned to our South Carolina standards, that's how we're going to move the needle for kids. And so that's what we're doing in math. Our General Assembly has come to the table in both reading and math and supported that professional development for our teachers, that high quality instructional material. So we're making incredible progress. And I know I'm kind of going on here because I just get so excited about this. The last thing I'll say is that on the literacy front, we have seen a 43% decrease this year in the number of third graders who are in the lowest reading category on our state test. That is massive improvement. That's real progress for 7,000 students. I mean, it's unbelievable, really. And so we're seeing the return on investment of the hard work of our teachers and the partnership that we have had with the General Assembly in getting us the funds to do what we need to do. So I'm excited about the reading future of our state, and I know we're going to have the same success as we start to roll out the Palmetto Math Project.
Well, that sounds great, but one of the things that always concerns me, Ellen, and we had gone through some of that this year with our school district right here, is making sure that we have well-rounded students. The math, the arts and drama and music and all of these, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that those are very important and help our children learn.
You are absolutely right about that, and I'll be the first to personally testify. I was a fine arts kid. I grew up playing the piano, and then I sang in choir in high school, and it's incredible what you learn from participating in sports and the fine arts and other extracurricular things. And, even at younger and younger ages, Ann, if it's not a structured activity, we know that there is actually real tangible behavioral and academic benefits to just letting young children play. And so that's another important initiative that we actually are launching here in South Carolina this next school year. There's a foundation called Let Grow, and it was founded by a gentleman named Jonathan Haidt, who has done a lot of national research on the danger and the negative impact of cell phones and technology overuse on our young people. And so this Let Grow Foundation that he helped start is all about introducing free play and play clubs back into school, really getting back to how you and I grew up. We had play-based childhoods, not phone-based childhoods. And so we need our young people to get outside and to play with each other because they're actually learning important social skills when they do that. So I am 100% in agreement with you. We have to keep a strong focus on academics, but we can't lose sight of the extracurriculars too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's pretty bad when we have to teach children how to play, though, isn't it? Seriously, right? It's a very different world than you and I grew up in. And, the interesting thing about Jonathan Haidt's research is that, really 2010 was the year that everyone started almost universally having access to a smartphone, to an iPhone. And we have seen massive spikes in the data in terms of depression amongst young people, suicide attempts amongst young people, anxiety, and just so many other things. And then, of course, we had the pandemic and the isolation that brought to our kids that has just reinforced that that damage, honestly. And so we really have got to get back to what makes us human. All this technology, all this AI, of course that's important. We need our students to be equipped,
for the technology jobs of the future. But at the same time, we have to remember that what makes us good at those jobs is our humanity and our creativity. And so we have to give our students outlets to be human. and so I'm so excited about the work that we have going on in South Carolina that really prioritizes that.
Well, that's great. I work with an organization, Greenwood Performing Arts here, and we go into the schools and actually bring high-level musical artists in to work with the students, but we do it from a little bit different. We bring it in, we want them to learn about the artist before the artist gets there. The artist then talks about their life. They talk about the life lessons they've learned and how they got into the business so that they can see that there are different ways to do things. And one of the biggest things is the fact that, that even if you're not a professional, that you can enjoy music, for example, all your life.
Yes. And that's certainly been my experience. So I actually started out in college and as a piano performance major. I quickly decided that my talents did not lie in that direction in terms of practicing in a piano studio for, 8 hours a day. But I still have a piano in my house. I still play for my church. I'm able to go, sometimes to different retirement facilities and play for the residents there. So, you can use those musical talents and gifts your entire life, even as a non-professional. It brings a lot of joy, not only to you, but to the people around you.
Absolutely. Well, so I'm glad to hear. So recess is still important.
Recess is vitally important. Yes, our children have to play.
Okay, all right. I'm glad to hear that because I've heard some things where we'll give them 15 or 20 minutes to have lunch, and then we want them back in their seats, and we want them reading. And I was like, well, when do they get to push off some steam?
Yeah, no, they have to. And I'll tell you just one really concrete example that I'm so proud of here in South Carolina. There's a gentleman who is a fourth grade teacher up in Pickens at the Central Academy for the Arts, speaking of the arts, and his name is Kevin Steinhardt, and he was actually featured in Jonathan Haidt's national bestseller book called The Anxious Generation. And Kevin has been on the forefront of leading the national movement around free play for children. And he actually had a university researcher come in and look at the outcomes in his school. And because of the free play that the children are engaging in, they have seen behavior improvements in terms of fewer discipline problems. They are seeing academic improvements because the kids, like you said, have blown off that steam, and then they're able to focus when they need to focus, right?
Right.
And so it's part of being a well-rounded person, and we have to remember that that's a critical part of education.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about. I happen to be looking on your website. I noticed Eleanor Rice Elementary School has gotten a grant for this strategic compensation pilot grants. And they got one for excellence in teacher approach and state collaboration approach. And that's right here in Greenwood. So I thought we might highlight that one. What can you tell me about that one?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. So one of the things that I think we have been missing in education for a long time is figuring out innovative ways to reward our teachers for the hard work that they do every day. It is, of course, absolutely appropriate for us to continue to give across-the-board teacher pay raises, and we already talked about what we've been doing in South Carolina to get our pay up to competitive levels. But we all know, and I think even teachers within a school will tell you, there are those teachers that have that extra spark. They put in the extra effort. They really go that second mile for their students, and that typically is going to show up in how their students do. And so the strategic compensation pilot is looking at how we reward those excellent teachers that are getting great outcomes for their kids, especially if they are in schools that are economically challenged or have some other type of challenge or disadvantage, because we want to keep our very best teachers in our most challenging classrooms. The children who have the biggest struggles are the ones who need our best teachers the most. And so this strategic compensation pilot is all about us figuring out how we keep those great teachers in the classrooms where we need them the most. So I'm excited. We had a $5 million statewide that the General Assembly gave us to run this pilot. This is the first year of the pilot right now that we're ending. And so we'll be going around announcing awards for teachers as we finish scoring the state exams in the coming months. So within the next month or two, there should be some really exciting announcements there in Greenwood and all across the state. And I'm happy to say, too, that the General Assembly has funded us for year 2 of the pilot as well. So we'll be able to continue it into next year. Our goal is, Lord willing, to be able to run a 3-year pilot and then to be able to come back to the General Assembly with the results of what we found. Have we actually been able to retain these great teachers?
Right. Well, that sounds great. And I think you had something like 118 different groups apply, schools, teachers, whatever apply. You were able to fund 37 out of that. So hopefully you will be able to grow that program.
I hope so, because the demand is definitely there. We had $5 million and over $20 million of requests that came in. So we know that district leaders are chomping at the bit to try this kind of differentiated strategic compensation approach. So we're very hopeful and excited to study those results. Absolutely.
So, Ellen, a lot of schools got caught flat-footed when the monies came out for the budgets this year. Evidently, this was something that was done back in 23, but they've been reducing the amount of money. And here in Greenwood, I think we had a $4.5 million shortage. All the school districts, 96, Ware Shoals, and of course Greenville was in the news with that $12 million shortage for their schools. Now, Greenwood was able to get their shortage, along with a little help from the state, not a lot, down to $2.5 million, and they are going to dip into their general fund to finance the rest of that. But this isn't sustainable long term. What do you have to say to our school districts that are struggling this way?
Yes, well, that's a very important point, Ann, and one that, I think districts all across the state and really all across the nation are facing because, for the last 3.5, almost 4 years now, there was a massive infusion of what we call ESSER money, which was the federal emergency money that was passed after COVID. And there were, some districts that, were relying on those ESSER funds to close shortfalls in their budget as their populations shrink, which is the reality in many of our rural communities. I would say that the situation in Greenville is not really analogous to what I would consider to be challenges faced in Greenwood. I mean, Greenville has a large and growing tax base, and really typically what they're talking about is just how much growth in their budget they're going to see. They're not actually talking about closing shortfalls for programs that they are currently offering that they might not be able to offer anymore. But that's not the case in a lot of our rural districts. I mean, here at the department, we're working with a number of our rural districts that have seen declining population, and because of that, they have, shrinking funds available to them. So we're going to have to work really hard with those districts to figure out how they achieve economies of scale, whether that's looking at, the number of schools that they have open, whether we're looking at the number of administrators that they have in the district office. There's a lot of different things that I think districts are going to have to look at to economize. And I want to emphasize again that, we have seen a big infusion of state K-12 investment. Since 2018-2019, we've seen about $1.9 billion in new spending for K-12 education here in South Carolina. And that's not local money, that's not federal money, that's just state of South Carolina money. And so, the challenges that our districts are facing are real. They've been exacerbated by the fact that federal money is going away. We also have other sectors in education that are continuing to grow. We've seen a lot of growth growth in our charter school movement. And so, those are real conversations that we're going to have to balance going forward. But I think the general message to our school districts is we deeply value education, especially locally led education in our state, and we're going to have to work together to figure out how to find economies in a changing funding environment. And that's just kind of the hard reality of where we are in education right now.
What do you think about the Department of Education possibly going away on the federal level, Ellen?
I think that we would love to have more flexibility on those federal funds here in South Carolina. I think that us being able to better and more efficiently allocate those monies to directly support our teachers and our students in the classroom would be a win for our districts, and it certainly would be a win for our state. We spend so much time and energy both at our State Department here in Columbia and in our local district offices dealing with federal compliance paperwork. And the point of that money is not to do paperwork, it's to actually support teachers and educate kids. And so, if the Department of Education went away tomorrow, it would not impact our federal funding here in South Carolina, because the funds for special needs under the IDEA program, and then the funds for our low income and other challenged student populations, they call them the title funds, those are all appropriated by Congress. And so in order for those funding amounts to change, it would require congressional action. I don't see that happening. I think that there's going to be and remain to have strong support in Congress for our special needs students, for the title funds, for our low income students. But what might be able to happen going forward, and I know what many people here in the states, my fellow state chiefs in other states, and then folks in Congress have been talking about, is the idea of, could we untie some of that those federal strings, cut some of that federal red tape, and block grant the allocations back to the state to give us more flexibility to support our priorities here in South Carolina around reading, around math, around teacher pay, instead of having to jump through all the hoops that we currently have to jump through for all the distinct programs that come to us through the federal budget. So I think that that would be a net win for South Carolina if we were able to work that out. But that's something that's still very much in the offing. There hasn't been any concrete proposal introduced to do that yet.
Well, I think we've had a few other things going on in the federal government right now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. A lack of bandwidth in terms of everything else that's going on. That's
sure. Right. That's right. Anyways, some of the other questions that we had some questions come in. And one of the questions is, some of our districts are wondering how they have to issue contracts like in March, but the budget for the state doesn't come out until, until May, and how they're going to deal with how they're going to pay or how much they can budget for. I mean, this year it's $1,500. Next year, I know McMaster wants to get it to $50,000. Next year it could get there. But how do our school districts work with working all that out?
Yeah, that is the ongoing challenge, and it's a challenge we certainly face here at the department too, because we are literally just looking at the projections as they come in. And so the way that budgeting process works and has worked historically for as long as I've known and can remember, is that every time the General Assembly goes through a different version of the budget, so after the House passes their version of the budget, after the Senate passes their version of the budget, after the conference committee comes together and meets, we at the department take the funding allocations that are in whatever is the latest version of the budget, and we put out projections to all of the districts to let them know, hey, here is the latest of what we're being told from from the General Assembly. So that's the best planning mechanism that we have currently. I don't know if there is a way that we could do that differently, but that's a much bigger question about how the General Assembly does the budget and the budget cycle. So, and we're certainly not the only state agency that deals with that, right? I mean, anybody who is paid as a state employee in South Carolina deals with that.
Yeah, I think the question that really is when they put out their contracts in March, they have to tell them how much they're going to make, which, that's kind of logical. But they can't tell them if they don't know how much money they're actually going to have coming in. I guess that was the question from some of our members in the community.
Yeah, no, and you're right. I mean, that is a real challenge. The best we can do on that currently is on the projections that we have from the General Assembly. There's really no other way to get at that, because they want, good districts want to be on top of making sure that they have their best teachers locked down, right? So the earlier that they can get those contracts done, typically the better. And you're right, that is a real inherent tension in how we do the budget process here in South Carolina. That's a challenge for sure.
Yeah. And, another question, I've got some people that are bus drivers, Ellen, and that, we expect them to move our children around. We expect them to do a great job, and yet they're not always paid as well as maybe they should be. Is there anything that is in the offing for school bus drivers?
I believe, and I don't want to speak out of school because I don't have the budget documents in front of me, but I'm almost positive that there was an increase in bus driver pay in the state budget this year. I do not have that amount in front of me, but I know that is an issue that is on the radar, not just of us here at the department and the folks in the district, but also the folks in the General Assembly. So I do believe we saw some movement on that this year. And you're right, that's something we need to continue to do. Retaining great bus drivers is so important in terms of our student safety. And, another big investment that the General Assembly has made over the last few years is making sure that we are maintaining our 15-year replacement cycle for our buses. There was a terrible bus accident here about a year and a half ago in Lexington County where a loaded tanker truck T-boned one of our school buses, and thank God it was one of our new buses that have just incredible structural support and build. There was hardly a scratch on any of the children, where there could have been fatalities if they had been in one of our old buses. And so I'm so thankful that the General Assembly does continue to prioritize our transportation system and making sure that we have the safest, most well-equipped buses on the road, because that's really important. Over half of our students ride a school bus to school every single day. And so paying those bus drivers well and keeping those buses well maintained is very important.
Absolutely. I mean, I've heard where some of them could go work at McDonald's rather than drive a school bus. And that's bad, Ellen. That's bad.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and I think, one of the things that I love about our school bus drivers, too, is that we have a number of retirees who come and drive a school bus because they really see this as a mission and as a way for them to give back to the community. And I just can't tell you how grateful I am for their passion and for their commitment for what they do every day. We have amazing bus drivers here in South Carolina.
You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. I happen to know a lot of them personally. So now let's talk about, because this is a question a lot of people don't understand. What is the difference between a charter school and public schools? And this year, it's a two-part question. So that's one part of the question. The other part is, this year it appeared, from what I've been told and what I've read, is that our charter schools got a bigger piece of the pie this year when it came to state funding. Can you explain some of that to us?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So just in simple terms, a charter school is a public school that works under a different governance model than our traditional public schools. So without getting too bureaucratic and mumbo-jumbo on you, our school districts are called local education agencies, or LEAs. And so they are a creature of the state, created by the state, to administer the public schools that are in their geographic area. Well, here in South Carolina, we have other education agencies that are charter school authorizers. And so they have the ability, they're not confined by a geographic district like our traditional LEAs are, so they can sponsor charter public schools all over the state of South Carolina. And there are some virtual charter schools as well. So those charter schools have their traditional, or the charter schools have their LEA that they report to. That's called the authorizer, the statewide authorizer. But then they also have local individual boards for each charter school. So instead of having one board like you would for a traditional district, each individual school has their own independent. So the governance model is different for one thing, but then the funding model is also very different. So our traditional districts are pulling in federal money, they are pulling in state tax dollars, and then they are pulling in local tax dollars.
Right.
Charter schools, because they don't have a defined geographic area like our traditional districts, don't get local tax dollars. They also don't receive, they also don't have bonding capability for infrastructure like our local districts do, and they also don't receive any kind of transportation funding or access to the state bus fleet like our traditional districts do. So charter schools have a lot less diversification and types of revenue coming in than our traditional districts. So what happened this year in the state budget is that because charter schools are almost exclusively state funded and they are growing relative to our traditional districts, many of which are shrinking, they had a larger proportion of the state money that then they have had in the past. So it's really just a simple math game. All of their money, they do get federal money, so not all of their money. The majority of their money comes from state sources. They don't get any local sources. And then they also are growing. And so I think that's why this year you really saw a lot of our traditional districts caught by surprise when they saw the proportion of money that the standard state formula allocated to charter schools. Now, our General Assembly actually ended up lowering the proportion of money that went to charter schools this year. So that was a change that happened pretty last minute in the budget. So that was changed, but that's kind of a quick synopsis of what a charter school is, how they're different than public schools, and then how they're funded. The last thing I'll say is just that public charter schools are accountable in the same way that our traditional public schools are, in that they are required to take the same state test that our traditional public schools take. So they really are public schools with different governance.
So they do have to take the amount of tests that our public schools have to take.
That's right.
That's right, because I was under the impression they weren't accountable for the amount of testing. So that's different than what I had been told. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. They take the state test, and what a lot of people don't realize is that there are different tests that the districts do, some of which they choose to do. They're not state mandated. So there are some state mandated tests, right? But anything that is mandated for public schools in terms of testing, our charter schools have to do as well.
Well, then maybe we should talk about the number of tests that are added in there that they don't really have to take, because we got a lot of kids that have test fright.
Yeah, no, I hear about test anxiety a lot, and I do think that really we have to have accountability, because to me accountability is responsibility. We have to be able to show in a concrete way that our kids are actually learning what they need to learn to be successful, but we have to make sure that the tests are meaningful, and we have to make sure that our teachers are getting feedback as quickly as possible, so that they can use that to inform their instruction, because at the end of the day, we don't test to be punitive, we test because we want our kids to be great and to have every opportunity that they possibly can. So we have to make sure that our testing is meaningful, for sure.
Absolutely. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have something I wanted to tell you about Greenwood, too. So you give me your question, then I'll give you my little story about Greenwood.
Okay. All right. How is the state addressing the shortage of special ed, math, and science teachers? Don't we have some shortages on those sides?
Yes, we have shortages not just in special education, but in middle school and in a number of other subject areas too. And so that's one of the things that the strategic compensation pilot is trying to get after, is how we attract teachers into those areas of greatest need. But we know that we have a lot to do on that special education front, and that's something that we're facing a problem in nationally. And so what I want to do here in South Carolina is have a listening session with our special ed teachers to really understand their challenges from the front row, and then also our parents of our students with special needs. I know so many of them love and value their special education teachers, but the federal processes are so cumbersome that it creates just a very negative and adversarial process. It makes it very challenging for our families who have students with special needs to get the services that they need. Sometimes the services can be very expensive. And so there's a lot of challenges in special education that it's going to take a lot of people coming to the table to talk about what are incremental, concrete steps that we can take to start to make this better, because I know it's a big challenge for everyone, and you're right, it certainly is driving teachers away from that as a classroom call.
Sure.
And we've got to get a hold of that.
But then also, don't we have some shortages with math and science teachers, though, too, Ellen, just in the regular school?
Yes, we sure do. We sure do. Yes, we have shortages across the board, and that's really, one of the things that we've been looking at as an agency. We had a strategic recruitment and retention task force that we did that came up with a number of recommendations for how we can advance the teaching profession. We saw some of those implemented into law this year with the Educator Assistance Act and with a number of other things. So yeah, we're looking at a lot of different strategies, very concrete strategies that can help us build our teacher pipeline. And another thing that was important that the General Assembly did this year, and maybe this would apply to some of your listeners today, if they have ever thought about teaching as a second career, the General Assembly passed a bill this year that would allow people with relevant career experience in their field that they want to teach to actually get credit for those years of non-teaching experience in their pay. And so that would be pretty incredible, I think, if we could find some folks who maybe aren't satisfied or don't feel like they're contributing in the way that they want to contribute in their current career and want to consider going into the classroom. You don't have to go to a four-year college to be a teacher in order to be a great teacher. Some of our best teachers are in our career and technology education programs who have come to us through an alternative certification pathway, out of industry and into the classroom. So I think there's a lot of really practical, concrete things that we can do to help build that teacher pipeline.
Or if you're just fed up with being in business. Right?
What's that?
I said if you're just fed up with being in business, right? I mean, some days you just want to say, let's shove this job and find something else. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I know our teachers have plenty of challenging and frustrating days too, but I know that there's also great reward in knowing that you're helping to build the future with young minds in the classroom. So
absolutely.
That's very special. And speaking of, so my Greenwood story is, I just wanted to close on a very positive note. I have had the opportunity over the last year and a half to really get to know Barry Jacks, who was a longtime principal there in Greenwood. I think he also taught in Abbeville and a couple of other districts prior to that. But last year, Pinecrest Elementary School, right there in Greenwood, it is a majority-minority school, 87% poverty. And did you know, Ann, that it is last year, it was the second highest performing elementary school in the entire state of South Carolina.
Absolutely.
It only lost out to Augusta Circle in Greenville by 2 points. And it's because they had an amazing principal leader in Barry Jacks. They were focused on the fundamentals. They were doing that science of reading that we talked about earlier, and they were doing the strong math. And you had a support team, an administrative support team at that school that was out there in the hallways serving their teachers every single day, asking them, what do you need? What can I do to help support you in the classroom? And that just creates a culture that great teachers want to work in. So I just think that should be a point of huge pride for the entire Greenwood community. And I have great hope for education in rural South Carolina. We have incredible people in our school system who are doing incredible things, and our students are so blessed.
Absolutely. Well, Ellen Weaver, South Carolina Superintendent of Education, keep fighting the fight, the good fight. How about that?
Yes, ma'am. I sure will. It's a pleasure to be able to do the job. Thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely. We'll have to have you in studio one time. That would be great, too.
I'd love to do that. I need to come meet Princess Penny.
All right. That sounds great. Thanks so much, Ellen. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, that was South Carolina Superintendent of Education Ellen Weaver on the line with us. Some interesting information, I think, came out in that interview. Some questions I hope that people have had that may have been answered. Interesting on the charter schools, some of the couple of the things I did not realize on how they are funded. I also didn't realize that they had cut some of the funding back to the charter schools, and she's absolutely right. For example, Erskine over in Due West has a whole network of charter schools that they are over. So that from that standpoint, I also didn't realize that they had to do the same required testing that our local school districts are required to do too. And also very interesting that a lot of, I don't know how many tests, that's going to be something interesting I'm going to have to find out. How many tests are actually required versus how many tests they actually take, right? So some of the things to think about, but this has been, I think, a very enlightening interview this afternoon with Ellen Weaver. She is the South Carolina Superintendent of Education. So I want to say that I am pleased that we had her on the air with us this afternoon, and I hope that it has given some information to people who were wanting to have some information. So we have had a past couple of weeks have really been jam-packed, whether we're talking to county council members, whether we're talking to Alan Wilson this morning, who was talking about his run for campaign for governor. And it's only just beginning. It's only just beginning. And then finish up the day today with Superintendent of Education for South Carolina, Ellen Weaver. So over the last couple of weeks, we really have been putting it away here, Ann, and I hope you will go back and look at some of these interviews if you missed them. Tomorrow morning I'm going to announce that you'll be able to not only see them on Facebook, but also on YouTube. Now, they'll not be live on YouTube, but they'll be posted that night for the next day, so you'd be able to go back and watch them there. So that's a few of the things that I have as far as knowledge. But the big news, really, really, really big news. I am excited. You know, this morning I didn't know whether whether they were going to get this suit that had been filed on the increase in the pay for what, Ann? Oh, come on, spit it out, Ann. For their increase in pay that was supposed to be in-district expense. Well, guess what? They went ahead and ruled on it. And guess what? I guess all my talking on the air might have helped just a little. I don't know, maybe just a little. But they did say that the South Carolina Supreme Court on Wednesday morning ordered a halt to compensation increase for the state's 170 lawmakers. The hike was to have gone into effect on July 1st. The Supreme Court filed an order to that effect, granting an injunction signed by all 5 justices here in South Carolina. The High Court ordered State Treasurer Curtis Loftus not to distribute any of the extra money to lawmakers in the new fiscal year. So let's see, it goes on to talk about the suit and everything. They said, in its order, the justices said the petitioners met the standards for them to grant a preliminary injunction. Those standards are: there would be immediate irreparable harm without the injunction, a likelihood of success on the merits, and no adequate remedy at law exists to halt the compensation increase from going into effect. At issue in the case, it was considered a lawmaker's per diem and whether the increase in the monthly in-district compensation should be allowed to kick in for the current General Assembly or whether it should become effective after the next election. A clause in the state constitution says lawmakers per diem can only be increased for a future General Assembly, not the current General Assembly. As part of the budget that goes into effect on July 1st, lawmakers approved a one-year provision increasing a lawmaker's in-district expense to $2,500 a month from the $1,000, so that was like an $18,000 a year raise. So that's we'll talk more about it tomorrow on the radio on the I Love Ann show, but I wanted to share that. I was actually kind of ecstatic about that because I just think it was so wrong the way it was done. I'm not sure that I'd have a problem if it had been vetted properly, but I did not believe that in a conference committee to have made that decision, and it looked pretty bad when they found they had an extra $1 billion of money coming into the coffers. They went ahead and gave them a, 2.5 or $3.2 million increase in the budget for their pay. So I, for one, am glad that this didn't go through. You do know that 37, I think, legislators decided not to take it. So there you go. That's what was happening at the Supreme Court this morning, and it's out now. So that's a good thing. I'm Ann Eller. This is, WCRS Radio. I am glad that we had Superintendent Ellen Weaver. You can go back and watch this if you want at a later time. Just go to WCRS 98.5 FM 1450 AM. We also are in the process of updating and changing our website, which is going to be exciting when that gets done. And starting tomorrow, you'll be able to also watch the interviews on YouTube for those people that don't like Facebook. So there you go. We've had a lot of fun yesterday afternoon with the Toros girls, the 2011-2012 Toro girls who won their state championship for the soccer, Toro soccer. They won the state championship. They went on to Plano, Texas. They didn't win there, but they learned a lot of valuable lessons. And I want you to know that video has gone viral. That's what I have to say. That video has gone viral. I was going to see if I could pull it up real quick here for you and just share that with you because it was pretty neat to see all the people that have enjoyed watching that video, checking that out. Let's see. Yes, here we go. Let's just check and see what it's up to now. Yesterday evening, it was moving. It was moving, and they just did it at 5 o'clock? Let's see. What do we have? Let's keep going here. Oh, my God. Here it is. Meet me at the diner with South Carolina Toro state champions 2011-2012 girls on their trip to Plano, Texas. It is up to almost 900 views. So keep liking and sharing it, and listen to them. Before we went on the air, they were all giggles. When we got on the air, they were all seriously talking about all the different aspects, and I was very impressed with the way they handled themselves on the radio. It's a video, and of course, it was on the radio yesterday. That, my friends, I think is going to do it for me. I hope you will stay cool. By the way, I forgot all about this. I forgot it. One of my Supremo texters, Stephanie, where is Stephanie? They had a a bear sighting by Miggs. Just want to have a little pizza. There you go. And so wanted to share what was being said here. I'm okay. Let's see. I'm not sure. Where was it? Well, I don't see it, but it was the fact that DNR, I think it's on Facebook somewhere, that DNR cannot, the only thing they can do is shoot the bears. They say just to stay away from them. They're just looking for food, and you're not really the food they are looking for. So if you see the bears, they said I know in that message it said something about since the hurricane, a lot of the bears left the mountains. They couldn't find any food up there, so they started coming down this way. So I think that is understandable. So these are some of the things that are going on in our community. We are seeing bears, and, when you see one in the parking lot of Miggs, that does kind of give you pause, doesn't it? But just realize they're just looking for food, just like you're going in to get your pizza. If they could go in the door and order a pizza, I'm sure they would order a pizza. But have a healthy respect. Do not try to get any pictures taken with them or anything else. You never know how a wild animal is going to react. So let's not find out, okay? That's word to the wise. In other news, let's go ahead and check the weather report. It has been another hot day here in Greenwood. Right now, listen to this. It's 97 degrees. They said, quote, it feels like 107 outside. And it says we have a severe thunderstorm watch also till midnight tonight. So let's thunderstorms possible around 7:45 tonight. Storms could contain damaging winds. So that's a little bit about what it says. Heavy thunderstorms during the evening will give way to cloudy skies after midnight. Storms could contain some damaging winds. I hope not. Low near 70, chance of rain 100%. 1 to 2 inches of rain is expected. Wow. Okay, so that's tonight. Thursday, we are going to cool down a little bit. We're except for a few afternoon clouds, mainly sunny. A stray afternoon thunderstorm is possible. High of 92. And Thursday night looks like we'll be right down about 70 degrees and winds light and variable. Friday comes in with mostly sunny early, scattered thunderstorms developing later in the day. Storms may contain strong gusty winds. I do not like this. High near 90 degrees, chance of rain 50%. That is on Friday. Friday night, partly cloudy skies, low near 70 degrees. And on Saturday, just because we have the time, we'll do it. Saturday, sunshine and clouds mixed. A stray shower or thunderstorm is possible. High of 92. And Saturday night, scattered thunderstorms during the evening, then becoming mainly clear overnight. Chance of rain, 40%. That's Saturday. Sunday's going to be a high of 92, low of 71. Monday we're going to stay in the 90s, it looks like. Low 90s, upper 80s is where we're going to be, and some potential for rain and showers next week. So, looks like we have made it through this oppressive heat that we have had. That, my friends, is going to do it for me. I hope you'll tune in with me tomorrow morning and listen right here on the radio or watch me on Facebook. Penny's kind of mad at me right now. She wanted to be on the radio, and I told her she had to wait. So she's not really happy. But she'll get over it, and we will get her on the radio real soon. She's learning how to be I'm not going to say a lady, but she's learning how to be a little more couth. How about that? Penny's learning how to be a little more couth. Anyways, I'm Ann Eller. This is WCRS right here in Greenwood. That's going to do it for me. Let's take it away with a little music to get us out of here, and we'll be joining the news will be coming up in less than 30 seconds. Let's take it away.